Good afternoon or good evening, depending where you might be. My name is Kevin Michael Grace, and this is the KMG show for Wednesday, November the 3rd, 2021. It happens every so often that I'm all set to go. Everything's been put up correctly, and I click on go live, and it just hangs and hangs. So I have to start again. So what do I have, a duplicate stream or something? Just let me check here. Do I have a duplicate stream? No, I don't. Here, just let me do some housekeeping here. I just have to send a message. Had to restart KMG show. Now live. There we go. Okay, so again, sorry about that. Here we go. I see the chat is working. So let's start with the election, the off-term election, which I'm going to call the Zoom election after a comment made by Steve Saylor 2 days ago. Before I get into that, I wanted to note something that I found fascinating regarding the results and their provenance. This is from NBC News. Virginia governor election results 2021, Youngkin wins. 99% of expected vote in, with 62,000 estimated remaining. And let's see, how far ahead is Youngkin? Well, he is he's 80,000. So I don't think even there'd have to be stupendous amount of jiggery pokery to overturn this result. But let's look at the election day votes. Youngkin beat McAuliffe 58 to 42%. That was 57% of the vote. Early in-person votes. McAuliffe beat Youngkin 54 to 46. Early by mail votes, McAuliffe beat Youngkin 75 to 24. I guess this is what they call ballot harvesting. Now, there were some revelations there in the last few days of the campaign. McAuliffe saying that he didn't think that parents should decide what their children learned. And also his last-minute statement that Virginia had too many white teachers. People should vote on Election Day, and the only people who shouldn't vote on Election Day are those people who have, well, an excuse, an ironclad excuse. That is to say, they are in the military or in the diplomatic service. There's really no excuse for people not to vote on Election Day otherwise. And I look at these figures for early in-person votes and early by mail votes, and 2020 and 2018 become much clearer in retrospect. Let's look at the figures for New Jersey governor, which was, of course, much closer than it was supposed to be. Now, according to NBC, only 87% of expected vote in, which, of course, is suspicious, estimated remaining 378,000. So, Election Day votes. Citarelli beat Murphy 58 to 42. Early in-person votes, Murphy beat Citarelli 53 to 47, and early by mail votes, Murphy beat Citarelli 73 to 26. Are you seeing a pattern there? It doesn't look like Citarelli can pull it out. He is 19,000 votes behind Murphy. There are 78,000 votes remaining, according to NBC News, but we know how these late counted votes break and how they always break. They always break for the Democrat. You know, seeing as the early in-person votes and the early by mail votes, especially the last category there, they've been there. So why aren't they counted first? I have a suspicion why, but it would probably be not prudent of me to say. Kane from Citizen Free Press. Virginia elects Black Republican woman as lieutenant governor. Congratulations, Winsome Sears. That's an amusing name. A lot of Black women have amusing names. I quite like the word winsome. There is an E added to it here, but Winsome Sears. I like it. And there is a picture of her holding a rifle, one of her ads, battle-tested conservative Semper Fi. Okay, I guess we know where she is coming from. She won pretty handily, 55 to 45, which is what they call in the United States a landslide. And Jason Mieres won for Attorney General against Mark Herring, who was the incumbent, again, 55 to 45. A very bad night for the Democrats in Virginia, which had been written off as a blue state. There were early reports that a majority Black district in Virginia had gone for the Republican. Considering how much the race tightened, I don't think that would have held up. And, oh, yes, not a good day for, well, progressives, shall we say, or lunatics anywhere in America yesterday. This is from the Post-Millennial. Antifa supporting candidates losing by huge margins in Seattle. Moderate candidates projected to win. One of the most interesting races was for city attorney, where Nicole Thomas Kennedy got shellacked 58 to 41 by Ann Davidson. Thomas Kennedy was notorious for saying that property destruction is a moral imperative. This is a woman who was running for city attorney. She had also tweeted, "I have not taken any of this anti-bias training, but I for sure hate this country." Oh, speaking of insurrection, she tweeted September of last year, "I've been looking for land in between Seattle and Portland for something like this. I think we are in for the long haul direct action wise. It would be ideal to have a place in the woods for activists to recharge and stage between the two cities." Is the Department of Justice on this one? I rather doubt it. Let's see what Steve Saylor had to say. Fathers who worked from home during the pandemic got more exposure to what their kids were being taught over Zoom. I would think mothers, perhaps, as well. Rando7895 responded, "Education is apparently now the #1 ranked issue among Virginia voters, a tribute to both the common sense of the electorate and the discipline of the Youngkin campaign." However, we will find out later that education, the word education, is a dog whistle. Yes, just like Law and Order used to be. And let's look at some more detailed results. Virginia 2020 white women. Biden 50%, Trump 49%. Virginia 2021 white women 57% Youngkin, 43% McAuliffe. White women college grads. Virginia 2020 58 Biden, 41 Trump. Virginia 2021 62 McAuliffe, 38 Youngkin. White women non-college. Virginia 2020 56 Trump, 44 Biden. Virginia 2021, 75 Youngkin, 25% McAuliffe. Yeah. So I guess if you're looking for a non-crazy woman, probably best to look for one who isn't a college grad. And it would appear that the white women college grads are doubling down. I wonder how far this can go. Could they get their numbers up to 90%, say, the way it used to be, votes for the Democrats in the District of Columbia? And of course, there's a lot of squawking. Oh, these stupid women, these stupid women who haven't gone to college. What's wrong with them? Yeah, more on that shortly. And, in 2016, I was speaking of anger yesterday, and I neglected to mention this, the collective nervous breakdown of the elite class and the aspirational class over Trump's victory. There was a lot of genuine screaming, a lot of genuine tears. For years afterwards, we were told that these people were literally shaking and that they were self-medicating with drugs and alcohol. And my favorite, they were eating too much. But apparently it's the right that are the crazy people. Steve Saylor wrote at UNS in response to a column in the Washington Post by Dana Milbank. Democrats led Biden down McAuliffe, and democracy paid the price. Democracy. The mansions and the cinemas and the Jayapals, by making the perfect the enemy of the very good, have handed an advantage to an illiberal faction that is stoking white nationalism. Youngkin's victory confirms a depressing reality. Trumpism succeeds as a tactic even in the absence of Trump. How about that? Though Youngkin nominally distanced himself from Trump, he didn't mention Trump often or attend events where Trump spoke on his behalf. He ran a classic MAGA campaign, raising racial fear and animus among white voters by scaring them about crime and the phantom menace of critical race theory. Scaring them about crime. Only stupid people are afraid of crime. We should embrace crime as the diverse phenomenon that it is, as a liberating phenomenon as it is. And the phantom menace of critical race theory. This was one of the major themes of today's COPE. Critical race theory doesn't exist. It doesn't exist, but it's a good thing that it does. Yeah, critical race theory doesn't exist. Okay. Steve Saylor comments, critical race theory is an extremely polite euphemism used by Republicans unwilling to denounce it for what it is, anti-white racist hate. And Milbank continues, actually, Democratic turnout was exceptionally high, but it was even higher on the Republican side. Saylor again. In other words, this election was a triumph of participatory democracy. But back to Milbank. Democrats, you are running out of time to save democracy. Final word to Saylor. Oh, but I forgot what the word democracy actually means in the Washington Post is when the Democrats win. But it's not just in America. And we've seen this in Hungary, in Britain, and in other places that, oh my God, in Poland, that's another good example. Europe is facing a crisis of democracy. Well, what does that mean? Occasionally the bad guys win, and we cannot have that. Let's go to the chat. Hello to Dan, Pelpcasso88, Dawn from Beyond, Emmett Kelly's Earth, Ann Run, Urban Planner, Chogokin 666, William Hicks. Do a show on the metaphysics of evil, Kevin. I'm going to be mentioning that when I talk about Joseph de Maistris, the executioner, on Friday. And the question is, can perverse people be happy? Can they feel real happiness? Okay, hello to Brandon Biden. No sleep till Breezewood, PA. One more glitch in Crypsis. Yes. I'm getting there. Hello to Head McNeck, Jim Smith, Curtis Lost, Curtis Being. Hello to Chad Chadson, our valiant moderator. Thank you for your service. Jogakin 666 says we have a black mayor, y'all. Anran says the Dems can't, broken water pipe every election, but they will certainly do it when it is necessary. Isn't there likely to be a recount in New Jersey? Yeah, and who's going to be in charge of the recount? Wasn't it Stalin who said, it's not the votes that count, it's the people who count the votes? Uh, yes, I'm old enough to remember when the Republicans stole the election, says Chogokin 666. That would be in 2016. Also in 2004. Also in 2000. Hello to Halper. Put the win some, lose some headline on ice. Really? No Sleep says, in a just world, the new Fraser series would be about Fraser and Niles constantly trying to rationalize their city falling apart, while the occupied chair of Martin looms above them. Unoccupied, yes, because the actor who played him, a British man from Manchester, actually, died a few years ago. My understanding is that in this reboot, he's not going to be living in Seattle anymore. So yes, let's further make him a rootless cosmopolite. I mean, why? Of course, I don't know. The show never made a lot of sense radio-wise. You've heard me talk about this before, but talk radios, it's all politics now, you know. And that radio station that he was on, I don't know, the gardening show, the food show, the craft show, all that stuff is on the weekends, if it's on the weekends at all. And I suspect, when they can play Rush Limbaugh repeats, or who's ever replaced Rush Limbaugh, and the heavyweights, I mean, there's just that sort of niche programming has been driven out of radio. Oh, to Kyle Free. Rustin Shackelford says Republican Virginia voters can now sit back and smile. Tax cuts for big business and representatives hiding at our tables as soon as anti-white and gay issues are discussed. We shall see. No Sleep says the actual series will probably be an apology tour for the episode with the black radio host who plays on Frasier's white guilt. I remember that episode where he was given a co-host. It was that woman who used to be on In Living Color at the beginning. She was a very attractive woman, actually, black woman. And then supposedly something happened with one of the Wayans brothers, and she fled the show and gained a whole bunch of weight. I don't know any more than that. She was funny on that episode. Hello to Professor Polk, who says, now I'm being harassed and threatened by parents of children I referred for discipline. That is a huge change in my lifetime. There was a solidarity of adults when I was young, and for some time afterwards, that if you were in trouble with the teacher, you were in trouble with your parents. If some other parents saw you doing something stupid on the street, say, and reported it to your parents, you were in trouble with your parents. I mean, it was commonplace that, some kid would be dragged, some mother would drag some kid, not her kid, to someone else's front door and hammer on the door and say, do you know what your kid just did? I believe that happened to me once when I was 5 years old. But no, I mean, the idea of parents, we'll sue you. We'll sue you what? Because your child screamed at the teacher, or, screamed obscenities at the teacher, or threw a chair or something. William Hicks says Hillary certainly did a lot of eating and drinking after the 2016 election. She is massive now, just massive. No Sleep says they ran out of Republicans to blame. Now it's time to blame the last 2 or 3 blue dogs in the whole country. False flag. Yeah, I don't know. We don't even know who's running the government of the United States, which people should be frightened of, but the regime media certainly isn't. Steve says, I don't let my enemies tell me what I'm allowed to be concerned about. We should always remember, those of us on this side, what Lenin said. Lenin gave some very good advice, which is accentuate the contradictions. Hello to Red Sulfur and Gamion. Gamion says perversity is the opposite of love. Did Adams have any chance of losing, says Gamion? Was this before, did he win before or after he started driving on the sidewalk? Chogokin 666 says they've aimed their horseshit democracy rhetoric inwards, meaning whatever regime they disagree with is democratic. Hello to Dan. They'll have Niles living next to the Chaz. Hilarity ensues. No, they should have Niall living inside the Chaz. Then, I don't know, panic and hysteria would ensue. Red Sulphur says, found a decent Sicilian red for less than $8 US today. I don't know that I've ever come across Sicilian wine, let alone whether it is good. Hello to Vienna Chronist. He did move to Chicago at the end, says no sleep. Most Cheers characters have a real refusal to settle down, but it cannot be addressed due to the discontinuous sitcom format. Well, it would be like, rebooting Seinfeld and setting it in Los Angeles. I mean, the show was shot in Los Angeles, but it was a show about New Yorkers. Professor Paul says, Gott mit uns, Vienna. And what GMO lab have they pulled these people out of? Gamian says, my parents deferred to my teachers to a fault. I would have liked them to defend me for once. Okay. And who else do we have here? Niles in the Chaz gay bar says no sleep. Well, that was a pretty good gag on Fraser. That Fraser was so prissy, and then his brother was prissier still, and then they had that guy Gil Chesterton. I don't know why they gave him that significant name, who was so prissy that no one could possibly deny that he was homosexual. Okay, so let's get back to it here. And, here's, Republicans flipped Texas seat where Beto won by 20 points. Lujan, a Republican, appears to win HD 118 special election runoff, 51-49, with all vote centers reporting. Yeah, how about that? Beto O'Rourke. The phony Hispanic. What's his name? What was his name? Robert Fitzgerald O'Rourke? Wasn't his name something like that? No. It's not cool to be Irish anymore. I'm Hispanic. Okay, let's get to the Schadenfreude. And the Schadenfreude is pretty great today. Van Jones, Democrats are annoying the American people. Axelrod, Democrats have no connection to normal Americans. Also, Democrats need to rethink their socialism. Van Jones occasionally gives evidence of, being sane. Oh, but let's get to Sunny Hostin. Yeah. Let's let the fur fly. This is from Pam Key at Breitbart. ABC legal analyst Sunny Hostin said Wednesday on ABC's The View that the 57% of Virginia's white women who voted for Glenn Youngkin for governor wanted to pretend slavery didn't happen. A guest host NBC sports broadcaster Michelle Tafoya said Biden uttered his name 25 times in a speech and it didn't stick. Yeah. Hostin said, I think it did stick. I think Trump was very present. He's omnipresent, Sonny. He's everywhere. I think he made a lot of phone calls for Youngkin. I think Youngkin was careful not to mention Trump by name, but he was Trump all in. If you look at the exit polls, 57% actually of white women voted for Youngkin. And what they said during the exit polls was that CRT was their most pressing issue. She added, I think what's interesting is that, Democrats are not good with the messaging that CRT is fake. No. Slavery. No, slavery. Legacy's never gone away. Legacy of redlining, 1619. White people are evil, but CRT is fake. Doesn't exist. Joy Behar said it doesn't exist in the school system. It's in law school only. Hostin said, of course, it doesn't. Whoopi Goldberg said, listen, if people want to know what's being taught in your school, go over to the school, get an idea of the curriculum, because they'll give it to you. Or they'll keep it secret. For instance, also in Virginia, I believe in Loudoun County, where all hell broke loose when some father discovered that teenage boys were given materials instructing them how to perform fellatio with illustrations of one boy on his knees. Do you think that's the sort of thing that school boards want outsiders to know? Tafoya said, whoopee, also people were watching their kids online during the pandemic. They heard a lot of this and recorded a lot of this. It may not be exactly what CRT is, but there was a lot of radicalized teaching. I'm not talking about teaching slavery. That's fine. That's all good. I'm warming up to this Tafoya person. Goldberg said, you remember what happened during the pandemic? I think George Floyd happened during the pandemic. That is why people were talking about race. No, and Americans were not talking about race until George Floyd. America has been obsessed with race since, what, the 1960s? Since the time of, Watts riots? Kerner Commission, when was the Kerner Commission? 1969, 1970? Whoopi continued, most schools that I'm aware of have tried to teach the history of how this country has gone on. You cannot put in a different name. You can't pretend we didn't go through this. Who? Yes. And Tafoya responds, no one is pretending. No one is pretending. My second grade report was on slavery and the abolition of slavery. It's being taught to my kids. No one is pretending it didn't happen. In fact, I think when we whitewash history by getting rid of certain names and statues and people and Laura Ingalls Wilder references, then we forget. We need to learn. Hostin said, I suspect 57% of white women that voted for Youngkin do want to pretend it didn't happen, and they don't want their white children to. And Tafoya said, I wouldn't suspect that of those women. That is not fair. Yeah. Slavery. Slavery is a forbidden topic in America. So that when Colin Kaepernick said that the NFL draft was just like slavery, Americans said, what the hell is he talking about? Slavery? I've never heard of that. Couldn't he have used a, more relevant comparison? This is from Tristan Justice at The Federalist. MSNBC panelists had a meltdown at Tuesday night at the thought of a potential Republican statewide victory in Virginia for the first time since 2009. Republican businessman Glenn Youngkin, according to Nicole Wallace, hey, not looking too good for you never Trumpers these days, is it, Nicole? Laundered Trump's really sort of disgusting, flagrant out racism. Where did you learn to speak? Really sort of disgusting, flagrant out racism. Wallace repeated the Democrats' false talking point that critical race theory infecting K-12 education is a cooked-up conspiracy made up by conservatives. His campaign promise, Wallace says, is on day one, I'm going to ban critical race theory. That is like us banning the ghosts. There are no ghosts. She said that Youngkin had wrapped his campaign in two big lies. Oh, and that he was putting racism in a disguise. Of course, Virginia schools are indeed teaching critical race theory, as outlined by City Journal reporter Chris Rufo. Former Democratic governor and repeat candidate Terry McAuliffe's own Department of Education demanded Virginia teachers, quote, embrace critical race theory, unquote, a form of state-sponsored racism indoctrinating students to see the world entirely through the lens of skin color. Rufo had tweeted on October the 30th, Terry McAuliffe's closing argument is that critical race theory is a racist dog whistle that has never been taught in Virginia, but I can debunk this lie and prove that McAuliffe himself was the first Virginia governor to promote CRT. And guess what? Examples from government documents. MSNBC's Joy Reid, the stupidest woman on television, labeled Republicans, that's me, not the Federalist writer, labeled Republicans dangerous to our national security. These Republicans are dangerous. This isn't a party that's just another political party that disagrees with us on tax policy, that at this point they're dangerous. She charged Republicans with stoking a form of white nationalism that leads to domestic terrorism. Yes, and the reason that Joy Ann Reid, who is the stupidest woman on television, has a primetime slot on MSNBC is because America is a white nationalist country. Similarly, Don Lemon at CNN. The network anchor pointed to the January riot at the U.S. Capitol to make her point, never mind the repeated outbreaks of explosive unrest, which became routine nationwide last summer. Yes, peaceful protests, of course. The riots were provoked by concept espoused by critical race theory and embedded in the New York Times anti-American 1619 Project when presented with the idea of branding the violent unrest marking a summer of rage as the 1619 riots. The architect of the project, Nicole Hannah-Jones, said it would be, quote, an honor. In the late stages of the campaign, Youngkin pivoted from running a conventional Beltway Republican campaign in a state turned reliably blue over the last decade to one of a cultural conservative crusader in defense of parental oversight of schools. The full pivot came in on the heels of McAuliffe declaring on the September debate stage, quote, I'm not going to let parents come into schools and actually take books out and make their own decision, unquote. Education became a focal point in the race, aggravated by 18 months of school closings and a fall letter from the National School Boards Association, citing protests at Virginia school board meetings in their labeling of concerned parents as domestic terrorists. Well, I'll tell you this. If mothers of school-aged children are turning against teachers, this is a watershed moment. It has been my experience for decades that typically mothers of school-aged children are besotted with teachers. They're almost like groupies. Whenever teachers go on strike in my province and they're standing with their placards at the side of the road, you see all the women honking their horns, and yay, yay. And they go to the parent-teacher conferences there to cheerlead for the teachers. They don't really seem to know what's going on in the schools, what their children are being taught, but, they're experts or they've been instructed by experts. And again, if this is changing, this is big news. Boston has a Chinese mayor now. Oh, the first female mayor, the first Asian mayor. What I want to do is to live long enough so that they run out of firsts. They'll have to resort to second or third, right? Eileen McNamara has a piece in the New York Times, the home of alternative reality. She teaches journalism at Brandeis, and she won a Pulitzer Prize as a columnist for the Boston Globe. And it's called Boston Isn't Boston Anymore. Michelle Wu's win proves that. Eileen McNamara is an exceedingly Irish name, and Boston was a Irish majority dominated city for a long, long time. And here we have Eileen McNamara celebrating her own displacement in her own city. Time to retire the tired old tropes about Brahmin swells, Irish ward healers, and the petty parochialism that for too long has defined the city on the national stage. A Taiwanese American woman from Chicago is about to become the mayor of Boston, a town that until Tuesday had elected only white men to that office. Okay, Taiwanese, and also from Chicago, not a native Bostonian, a foreigner, in other words. Michelle Wu defeated Anissa Essaybai George, a city council colleague whose father is from Tunisia and mother was born to Polish parents in a German refugee camp. The election of Wu, a 36-year-old lawyer, rather young for the job, I think, represents a seismic shift to a political landscape in which white and male, boo, were prerequisites to be elected mayor since the position was established here in 1822. Yeah, okay. It's a long way from the Irish domination of the mayoralty that began in 1884 with the election of Hugh O'Brien, a native of County Cork. The office was held without interruption by men of Irish descent from 1930 to 1993, when Thomas Menino became the first Italian-American to claim the job. Let's have some more stereotypes here. That was almost 30 years ago, but like most caricatures of this city, the idea of Boston is more Irish than Guinness Stout, retains a stubborn hold on the national imagination. In fact, Boston has been a minority city since the turn of this century. Yay, the great replacement is not happening, and it's a good thing that it is. When census figures first confirmed the percentage of non-Hispanic whites had dropped below 50%. Reading this column, one wonders whether Eileen McNamara, what she dislikes more, her own people or simply whites or men. Kind of a toss-up. Canada Corner, I'm trying to make this brief. Chris Selly in the National Post is generally sensible. He has a column yesterday, fracas over our flag is a distraction entirely of Trudeau's making. Maybe Trudeau doesn't care, or maybe he does care, but he's barely capable even of thinking beyond symbolic gestures, let alone acting. Marie Wilson, one of the Truth and Reconciliation Commission's 3 commissioners, made a trenchant point in an interview with CBC News during the recent federal election. Whatever the wisdom of lowering a Canadian flags, quote, until further notice, unquote, in memory of the children found and waiting to be found in unmarked grave sites on the grounds of Canada's former residential schools, the gesture had a sell-by date. At a certain point, Wilson argued, people might well just stop noticing, and if you stop noticing, that loses its value. Okay. Here's the thing. The Kamloops Residential School, the former Kamloops Residential School, you know how many bodies have been found there? 0. That's right, 0. Not one has been found. X-ray analysis found evidence of so-called disturbed ground. And they said something like, what was it, 218 children had been dumped there? Oh, really? So, 215. So what did the exhumation prove? Well, there wasn't an exhumation. Why? Because it would be disrespectful to the dead. Oh, so you're accusing Canada of a crime, of genocide. But no, we're just going to take it on your say-so, because it would be disrespectful to provide evidence. But of course, thousands and thousands of Indians got tons and tons of bucks, tens of thousands of dollars from the federal government because they claimed abuse, either physical or mental or sexual abuse at Indian residential schools. And the evidence was that they said that it happened. Well, you know, if you're offering people large sums of money to claim that bad things happened to them, what do you think they're going to say? Huh? In some ways, you'd have to be a fool not to go with it. There's a piece by Stephanie Taylor in the Canadian Press. Aaron O'Toole, who despite his name is actually a man, he spells it E-R-I-N, as I pointed out before. His parents chose this name presumably because O'Toole wasn't enough to demonstrate to the world how Irish he is. He insists that the Conservative caucus is united behind his leadership, but can he be as confident about the party's grassroots? The reaction from a handful of third-party organizations, which represent swaths of the Conservative faithful, suggests the answer is a likely no. And so the president of the National Firearms Association talks about the Conservatives throwing their base under the bus. And more from firearms owners. But so what should the Conservatives be talking about? Well, apparently, freedom. Yes, the National Citizens Coalition talks about freedom, conservative values, freedom and less government. That's a non-starter. What evidence is there that a majority of people want less government? Because pretty much everyone is addicted to the welfare state in one way or another. Really, the question comes down to whether our people are going to be rewarded, because their people are always being rewarded. And no conservative government, in the history of the world, history of the modern world, has ever made government smaller. Never, never. But they keep beating on this drum as if anyone is listening. And freedom. Well, what kind of freedom? The freedom not to be compelled to wear masks, to socially distance, to be double injected or triple injected? No, they're not going to talk about that. Populism is the future for any right-wing party, but no, it's as if they're writing. It's as if they're campaigning in the 1980s. Conservative values. I don't know. Is gay marriage a conservative value? Aaron O'Toole certainly seems to think so. Is letting homosexuals donate blood? Is that a conservative value? Aaron O'Toole certainly thinks so. Is forcing your 9-year-old child, a boy, to wear a pink T-shirt to support anti-bullying day? Is that a conservative value? The problem with values is that they are endlessly mutable. Truths are far more powerful. There's a piece by Seth Barron in The American Mind called Dreams of His Father. And I trot this out simply to prove what a liar and a phony Joe Biden is. If you didn't know that already. President Biden speaks constantly of his father's influence on his political thought and leadership. Joe Biden Sr., according to his successful son, instilled a strong sense of the importance of dignity in the workplace. Joey, the president, recently related, speaking of his father's advice, Joey, a job is about a lot more than a paycheck. It's about your dignity. It's about respect. Biden fee repeats this athgam constantly, though it remains unclear how it is applied to his own life. Despite claims that he was offered a job working in the timber industry in Idaho, or that he was a long-distance trucker, it appears that Biden only worked for a few years in the private sector for a politically connected law firm and was elected to the U.S. Senate at the age of 29. His sister made a career of managing his campaigns, and his two brothers both profited handsomely from their association with their famous relative. For example, his brother Frank is a senior advisor, that is to say, non-attorney, for the Boca Raton Berman Law Group, a personal injury firm, and his older brother Jim has spent his entire adult life using his siblings' connections for advancement. What was it that Tucker Carlson referred to Joe Biden as? What, a credit card salesman or a pimp for credit card companies? Hunter Biden's professional exploits have been amply covered. Suffice to say that neither dignity nor respect are the primary words that come to mind when one reviews his highly remunerative labor on the boards of Burisma Holdings and BHR Partners. Joe Biden's father's own career seems somewhat mysterious, with unexplained peripetia and sudden changes in fortune that led him to a variety of sales jobs in different cities, culminating, perhaps, with a sinecure at the dodgy Council for Labor and Industry in the 1980s. The weird thing is that when President Biden ascribes opinions to his father that are outside the realm of kitchen table talk about the value of work, in these cases, his dad is forced to ventriloquize opinions that make absolutely no sense in their ostensible context. For instance, shortly after the 2020 election, Biden held a televised town hall with ABC News. Asked how, as president, he would protect the rights of transgender people, Biden explained, "I will flat out just change the law. Eliminate those executive orders, number one." His commitment to the alphabet people community, he said, was something that was deeply ingrained in his consciousness, dating back to the Kennedy administration. One weekday afternoon in 1962, he said, his father dropped him off in Wilmington, the corporate capital of the world at that time, in order to get an application for a summer job as a lifeguard at his swimming pool. He witnessed a scene that would have startled any teenage boy. Quote, "And these two men, well-dressed, leaned up and hugged one another and kissed one another. And I'm getting out of the car at the light, and I turned to my dad. My dad looked at me and said, 'Joey, it's simple. They love each other,'" unquote. It's one thing to imagine a gay couple in 1962 smooching in an ill-lit Greenwich Village barroom. It's quite enough to picture it happening in downtown Wilmington, Delaware, which was and still is something of a small town, in a state which in 1962 still actively prosecuted sodomy and was one of only 3 states that prohibited probation for people convicted of crimes against nature, and is still another to imagine a supposedly devout Catholic father of 4 counseling his teenage son some 60 years avant la lettre that love is love. Yes, I think that it would be more likely that Joe Biden Sr. would have looked around for a switch to chase them off. We hear this sort of thing from beyond the grave of Joe Biden Sr. a lot. Speaking in October at the opening of the Dodd Center, after Christopher Dodd, the Dodd Center for Human Rights, Biden explained that his dad and Supreme Court Chief Justice Robert Jackson had a lot in common when it came to the question of collective guilt. Whenever we hear that kind of poisonous hatred, wherever we see our fellow humans being dehumanized, it doesn't mean we go to war, but we must speak out, explained the president. Silence, as my dad would remind me, silence is complicity. Silence is complicity. That's what Nuremberg said. Your silence is complicity. Yes, I can just imagine working class Joe Biden Sr. having a lot of, talks at the dinner table with his young son, his quite young son, about Nuremberg Code. This sort of thing happened all over America at the time. Biden's father was also irate about the failure of the American military to stop the Holocaust. How exactly would that have been accomplished? In remarks to the Jewish community in advance of Rosh Hashanah this year, he related that he was raised by a righteous Christian, a father who we made sure that we had dinner where we incidentally ate and we talked. And my father was the one who would rail against the fact that we didn't bomb railroad tracks in World War II and all. Yeah, shit that never happened. .txt. It's harmless enough, one supposes, to listen to an old man ramble on about his father's wisdom, though it might go down a little easier if what he supposedly said didn't all sound like MSNBC talking points. I must say in Joe Biden's defense that I prefer this sort of nonsense, or malarkey, as he would say, to Barack Obama pretending to be scandalized at his grandmother, his white grandmother, who effectively raised him and paid for his expensive private schooling from her job at the bank. Her husband didn't really work. And so one day she was waiting for the bus, and apparently she was menaced by 2 young black men. And she confessed that she was rather frightened of black men after that. And to Barack Obama, this was the worst sin imaginable. And we have to fight, he said in a speech, a well-reported speech, against attitudes like that. Yes, kind old granny, without whom your life would have been very different and probably much, much worse. But no, throw that old woman under the bus for political points. And, okay, let's go back to the chat before we talk about Meyer Kohab. I'm sorry, or Kobabe? Yeah, these weird names, but let's go back to the chat before we talk about transgender cartoons. You all know them. You all love them. Okay. Head McNeck says, I hate to be that guy, but that cartoon, as awful as it is, showed an adult short-haired lesbian. Okay. All right. I'm not going to repeat that. Yeah. Okay. Oh, jeez. KMG, is Pete Davidson dating Kim Kardashian, says Bernard Brightson. I don't know. Pete, I'm going to talk about ugliness, female ugliness, a little later, but Pete Davidson, there are few men in America who are, under 300 pounds who are more ugly than Pete Davidson. He looks like he's about to, vomit and then expire every time you see him. Also, he has no discernible talent. Okay. What else do we have here? Okay, there we go. There we go to the top here. No Sleep says Van Jones and David Axelrod are part of the annoyance who occasionally pretend not to be when the car wreck explodes. Steve says slavery, they're digging pretty deep into the grievance bucket. Hasn't CRT been around since the 1980s, says Jim Smith. I suppose it was around in an inchoate form, but now there's an enormous literature, academic literature, to bolster it. Ottomans and North American Barbary pilots enslaved millions of Europeans over the century, said, yes, red sulfur, indeed. And you can talk about the Irish in the 16th century sent to the Caribbean. Oh, how dare you? How dare you? This is like making comparisons with the Holocaust. This is nothing at all like slavery. This was indentured servitude. Oh, I see. And what were the chances of the Irish making enough money to buy their freedom back in the Caribbean? But let's not talk about that. Red Sulfur says Algiers was a huge slave market not that long ago, and it's my understanding that slavery was only banned in the Kingdom of Saudi Arabia in, what, 1962? I think that was the year. Vienna Chronist says CRT is as insulting to the intellect as the pandemic, as well as the effectiveness of, well, the jab. Recycling of lovers is a sport in Hollywood, says Gamia, and they all have had each other at one time or another. So gross. Yes, I noticed this with regard to David Foster, who comes from Victoria, where I live. When I say he comes from Victoria, that is to say he was actually not only born here, but he was educated here as well. And his first band was from Victoria. And I looked at who he had been with, who he'd been married to, and who those people had been with or married to. And Elvis is involved in there somewhere. You know, it's very incestuous. First foreign war fought by the U.S. was with Morocco over the Barbary pilot, said Red Sulfur. Yes, indeed. Easiest way to diffuse the racist label is to own it massively and say, so what? What could they do, said Red Sulfur. I would suggest something different. Basically, that racism is a term of no efficacy. What are you referring to? People preferring their own kind to others, say? Of people having a suspicion, sometimes a fear of the other, say? And so, what's your point then? Because this is universal. Okay, just saw an Amazon Prime commercial with black woman as a medieval princess in Europe, says Palcasso88. I have seen that commercial. I've seen it many, many times. It is being, as they say, shoved down my throat. New York Times was all about the second black mayor of New York City last night, says Brandon Biden. Yeah, okay. But is there any other attribute, special attribute, that could be called a first? What's his name, Eric or something? Is that what it's going to come down to? Yesterday, we saw the election of the first New York City mayor called Eric. Or, yesterday we saw the election of the first New York City mayor called Eric, spelled with a K. Yeah, we might get there. No sleep till Breezewood, PA says, sounds like we got a Taiwanese politician just in time to see if any libs want to go to war with China because reasons. A lot of these Taiwanese in America and Canada are pro-Communist Party of Canada. It has always been a liberal lefty city, but I think I might still have liked the old racist Boston. Well, the old racist Boston, the old democratic Boston was, again, rather like Wilmington, Delaware, in that if some working class, pious Catholic saw two people kissing in the street in downtown, he would probably look for a switch to run them off with. I like the way KMG is booing. Growing up in a farm, the sound is familiar to me, says Vienna Chronist. Okay. Mass gathering for extracurricular activities in Russian schools are banned until January 24, says Gamian. Doesn't look like Putin is going to save the world after all, was ever going to. Who else do we have in the chat? Oh, there is Metal Mike, and you just slipped away from me there. Let's see if I can get you back here. When I say slipped away, when people add a whole bunch of comments at once, then it rises, and what I was looking at is not there anymore. Okay. Metal Mike says, why did Joe Biden run for president in 2020 to begin with at his age? What motivated him? Perhaps his wife wanted to be first lady. I mean, he's too old to cash in. He's already cashed in. Obama cashed in a big way. Clinton cashed in a big way. By the time that Biden leaves office, and it may be, in a body bag, his time will have run out. Steve says Biden doesn't have an administration. The administration has a spokesman dash figurehead named Biden. Hello to Jaakko Rapala, our Finnish friend. No, it's a bunch of well-funded NGOs behind the laws. There were drag queens for ages in pop culture before this transsexual political movement got any of this power. Did you catch Holly's speech at the NCC, says Pitsky? I discussed it yesterday with regard to the critique of anti-feminism by Mary Harrington. Halper says to Metal Mike, it could have been a pressure somewhere like that scene in The Godfather. One day you may be called upon to perform a service. Hello to Lamprey Milt. How many of these Papa Biden stories are plagiarized? Has anyone ever checked? Given Joe's history, I would think the bulk are. I don't know. It would be very amusing to find out that Joe Biden Sr. was a hard drinking, embittered man of rather spicy political opinions because he'd not been very successful in life, Jaakko Rapala says Finland is a kind of special because we were a Soviet semi-puppet state during the Cold War. We got American pop culture fully, but we were close to the NGOs, corporations, and so on. After the USSR collapsed, we suddenly signed a bunch of deals with the West, and then it has been all we adopt this and that to be part of the Western value community, and now it's all rainbow flags. Yes, I got to make my obligatory Seinfeld reference when Jerry believes that a fellow Columbia student hired as a cleaner had stolen something valuable. Oh, and his girlfriend or fiance was a writer, a sort of avant-garde writer who had written a novel. Her name was Rava. And there was some sort of fuss about this. And the Columbia student said, she's Finnish. And Jerry says, I know Finland. They're neutral. Almost the entire Biden administration Jewish, if my memory is correct, says Dionysus. That appears to be largely true. But let's talk about trans cartoons. Because there seem to be an awful lot about. Now, I'm not saying, that drawing cartoons means that, or comic books rather, means that you're likely to be, an alphabet person, or specifically trans. But there seems to be a real connection there. So Maya Kobabe, or Kobabe, who knows, born 1991, is an American cartoonist. This person identifies as queer, non-binary, and asexual. E uses Spivak pronouns. And I looked up Spivak pronouns on Wikipedia. And as if there's not enough in life to drive you mad, these people have discovered words, specifically pronouns. Kobabe graduated with an MFA in comics, which is apparently a real thing, from California Culture of the Arts. Ear work, that would be a Spivak pronoun, features themes of identity, sexuality, anti-fascism, fairy tales, and homesickness. Ear graphic fiction work has been featured in The Nib, The Press Democrat, and SF Weekly. Kobabe's first full-length book, Genderqueer, a memoir, was published by Lion Forge Comics in 2019. Other comics include Alphabet, Tabula Idem, a queer tarot comic anthology. Oh, great. So we got witchcraft in there too. The Secret Loves of Geeks, Gothic Tales of Haunted Love, Mine, a celebration of liberty and freedom for all benefiting Planned Parenthood. Yeah, you got to get the abortion in there. Faster than light, y'all. I've seen pictures of this person, and this person does not at all look like a y'all person. How to Wait, an anthology of transition. Theater of Terror, Revenge of the Queers. Rolled and Told, Volume 2. That sounds sinister. And Be Gay, Do Comics. Okay. So I mention this because this person has become the object of controversy. And, of course, in the Washington Post, where democracy gets smothered or something, very late on the night of September 23rd, I was tagged in an Instagram video. It looked like a city council meeting with an angry woman talking about something at a lectern. I didn't turn the sound on. Here are the sickos who wrote those awful books, wrote a commenter tagging me and another author, Jonathan Evison. The next morning, I woke up to emails from journalists at the Associated Press and local DC news stations. My debut graphic book, Genderqueer, a memoir, had been banned at a Fairfax County School Board meeting. The story unfolded slowly. Over the next week, I learned that Fairfax County had become the center of a heated debate over transgender students' rights, and the protests and counter-protests at the board meetings had already resulted in shouting, chanted prayers, and an arrest. I learned from a Post article that one of the Fairfax parents chose to target Genderqueer and Evison's Lawn Boy, both of which happened to feature alphabet people characters, because she saw media coverage of the text after parental outcry in Texas. She then checked her children's high school library and saw Fairfax was offering the books too. One of the charges thrown against the book was that it promoted pedophilia, based on a single panel depicting an erotic ancient Greek vase. Oh, can we see the panel? Not in this, not in the illustrations for this article. Others simply called it pornography, a common accusation against work with themes of queer sexuality. A week later, I found that Genderqueer had also been banned in a school district in Florida, and within a month it had been challenged at schools in Rhode Island, New Jersey, Ohio, Washington, and Texas again. When I was on book tour in 2019, I was asked many times, what age of reader do you recommend this book for? I would generally answer high school and above. But the truth is, the readers I primarily wrote it for were my own parents and extended family. Seems like a rather time-consuming and expensive way to get a point across to your parents and extended family. When I was first coming out as non-binary, I kept getting responses along the lines of, we love you, we support you, but we have no idea what you are talking about. I came out as queer to my mom as a senior in high school. It took almost a decade to also come out to her as non-binary, even though I had been questioning my gender identity since I started puberty at age 11. Yeah, that's what they all say, or even earlier. They all have an origin story. You ever notice that? All the alphabet people have origin stories. A major reason for this long delay, yes, if anyone cared, between my first coming out and my second was the lack of visibility of trans and non-binary identities when I was young. By high school, I had met multiple out gay, lesbian, and bisexual people, but I didn't meet an out trans or non-binary person until I was in, wait for it, grad school. The only place I had access to information and stories about transgender people was in media, mainly in books. In the early 2000s, I lived in a house with no TV and limited internet access, so I turned to my local library for entertainment, or grooming, one might call it. I checked out stacks of fantasy novels and manga every week. Yeah, every single time. Manga. I was especially hungry for stories with queer characters. I devoured Skim by Mariko and Jillian Tamaki and Julie Ann Peters' Luna and Keeping You a Secret. I read Howard Cruz's masterpiece, Stuck Rubber Baby. There was Paradise Kiss, Rainbow Boys, Weetsy Bat, Annie on My Mind, Geography Club, Swords Point, Totally Joe, Very Le Freak, and everything I could get my hands on by David Levithan. These books kept me company through my years of questioning and confusion. The American Library Association, which tracks challenges, restrictions, and bans on books in schools and libraries, recorded that the #1 most challenged book in 2020 was Melissa previously titled George by Alex Gino, a narrative of a trans elementary schooler. Now you're making me angry. A narrative of a trans elementary schooler. That would mean 12 years old or younger, written by a non-binary author. So do books now have dead names? So there's a book called Melissa, but was previously titled George. We have reached, this is like those nested Russian dolls. That's what it's become like. Queer youth are often forced to look outside their own homes and outside the education system to find information on who they are. Removing or restricting queer books in libraries and schools is like cutting a lifeline for queer youth who might not even know yet what terms to ask Google to find out more about their own identities, bodies, and health. I would just type into Google seeking weirdo fetish stuff. How about that? That would work. You get there pretty quickly. Or I hate my body. Sex. 3 weeks after I first heard about the genderqueer ban at Fairfax County Public Schools, I received the message, "You probably won't ever see this, but I'm a queer FCPS student. My mom and I read your book." My mom, okay. I loved it. I related to almost everything you said. I felt so understood and not alone. I understand my mom understands me better, and I'm more confident in confiding in her since she read your book. Thank you so much for creating your memoir. This person seems to be very close, too close to mom. That's not a coincidence. That is standard operating procedure. Okay, so let's look at the illustrations. They tell a little story. Okay. So this person who looks, well, I guess asexual, looking at a smartphone. This seems like something I should not watch right before I go to sleep. Block, block, delete, block, and then sleep. And then up in bed. Shoot, I guess I should have watched that video. Why are they mad about the book? Because I said non-binary and trans people exist? They keep saying it's like CR2. CRT, it doesn't exist. It doesn't exist. Well, it does exist. These people are trying to say that we don't exist. No one is trying to say that. No one. This book has been out for 2.5 years. Why now? So this parent never read the book, and neither did her kids. She just wants to make sure no one's kids can. Is this going to start a domino effect? One band leading to another, and then there's a picture of cascading dominoes. And here we get to the heart of it. Age 17, sitting next to mom. And mom isn't wearing shoes. This appears to be on a porch, something like that. Anyway. And, okay, mom is wearing shorts and a sleeveless shirt and no shoes and braids. And there are 2 black cats. Guess what's missing? Mom, dad. Yeah. 1 mom, 1 child, 2 cats, no dad. Many such cases. Mom, I'm pretty sure I'm bi. And mom says, I always thought you were one of those kids who could go either way. Age 25, next panel. I know I told you ages ago that I'm bi, but now I think that I'm probably genderqueer too. Mom says, what do you mean? And there's a picture of her at age 15 reading trash, okay? Just reading trash. And then there's a picture of trash. And what am I at age 12, opening up the Merriam-Webster dictionary? And then present day, holding up a copy of Genderqueer. Please leave the queer books on the library shelves where the queer teens can find them. As a queer teen, I desperately needed them, and the queer teens of today need them too. What does queer mean exactly? As far as I could tell, this queer had just been an epithet, a pejorative. And then what, about 15 years ago, it started to become the opposite. And as far as I could tell, it meant the same as gay, only nastier. And so then we have genderqueer, which is like the same as gay, only nastier and more obscure. This is a person who uses the stupidest and most obscure pronouns in the world. I mean, how many people use Spivak pronouns? Fewer than 1,000 in the world, I would guess. But this is how this person asserts this person's identity. And in more transgender culture news, Jennifer Finney Boylan, another tragic case of the Irish diaspora, who for some reason is one of America's leading opinion mongers, has a piece in the alternative reality, again, that is the New York Times. Should classic rock songs be toppled like Confederate statues? I think the answer must be yes. A long, long time ago, I can still remember how that music used to make me smile. American Pie, Don McLean's generation-defining ballad, oh, piss off, was released on vinyl 50 years ago this October. The first time I ever heard it, I was with my sister in our kitchen. I was 13. I was eating a bowl of Alphabets cereal. It's good to know your breakfast choices. I would have figured you to be more of a Corn Pops person, or no, Trix. It came on the radio, and my sister, only a year older but centuries cooler, told me this is the greatest song ever. It is impossible for me to hear that song now without thinking of her. But when Patricia McNeil, Patricia McLean, Don McLean's ex-wife, hears American Pie, she isn't reminded of golden moments of adolescence or even the classic age of rock and roll memorialized by that song. Ms. McLean says she was subjected to years of emotional and physical abuse from her former husband. Ms. McLean was married to her husband for 29 years before the night 5 years ago that she made a 911 call. In the aftermath, Mr. McLean was arrested on suspicion of domestic violence. He was charged with 6 misdemeanors. He pleaded guilty to 4 as part of a plea agreement in which the domestic violence charge would be dismissed after a year. For the 3 other charges, criminal restraint, criminal mischief, and making domestic violence threats, he paid some $3,000 in fines. In the absence of pictures, say, or video, I'm very suspicious of such stories. It's been a commonplace for decades now for a woman who is upset with her husband, and perhaps there's been an argument, perhaps there's been some shoving, although the woman is just as likely to shove as the man. So she calls the police because she wants to hurt her husband, and indeed she does. I don't know the facts of this case. What does this have to do with American Pie? I hate that song. I've always hated that song. That his shot at Mick Jagger. Mick Jagger has more talent in one of his little fingers than Don McLean has in his entire body. But, okay. You want to know another reason why I hate Don McLean? He wrote a song which was a hit, not as big a hit as American Pie, called Vincent, in which he compared himself quite seriously to Vincent van Gogh. Yeah, that's right. You heard me right. They're both tortured artists. Starry, starry night. Paint your palette blue and gray. Look out on a summer's day with eyes that know the darkness in my soul. Shadows on the hills. Sketch the trees and daffodils. Catch the breeze and the winter chills in colors on the snowy linen land. Now I understand what you tried to say to me and how you suffered for your sanity and how you tried to set them free. They would not listen. They do not know how. Perhaps they'll listen now. Starry, starry night, flaming flowers that brightly blaze, swirling clouds in violet haze reflect in Vincent's eyes of china blue. Color changing blue, morning fields of amber grain, weathered faces lined in pain and soothed beneath the artist's loving hand. Now I understand what you tried to say to me and how you suffered for your sanity and how you tried to set them free. They would not listen. They do not know how. Perhaps they'll listen now. For they could not love you, but still your love was true, and when no hope was left in sight on that starry, starry night. You took your life, as lovers often do, but I could have told you, Vincent, the world was never meant for one as beautiful as you. Seriously, a hack folk rocker, comparing himself and his travails to Vincent van Gogh. In July 2020, according to Wikipedia, the original handwritten lyrics went up for sale for $1.5 million. The song peaked at number 12 in the charts. That's a pretty big hit. Not as big as American Pie, but okay. So maybe Don McLean is a man who beat his wife. What on earth does this have to do with a song that he had written and recorded decades earlier? I wonder if this woman has ever heard of Francois Villon, the French poet. He was, in fact, a murderer. There are other such examples. Since then, Ms. McLean has founded Finding Our Voices, a Maine-based nonprofit, blah, blah, blah. He denies ever having assaulted his wife, and his lawyer has said that he pleaded guilty not because he was in fact guilty of anything, but to provide closure for his family and keep the whole process as private as possible. Many such cases, actually. His iconic song still plays on the radio. The past several years have seen a reassessment of our country's many mythologies, from the legends of the generals of the Confederacy to the historical glossing over of slave-holding founding fathers. Oh, just shut up. This has never been glossed over in my lifetime, and I'm older than this woman. They're just liars. Liars. But as we take another look at the sins of our historical figures, we've also had to take a hard look at our more immediate past and present, including the behavior of the creators of pop culture. That reassessment extends now to the people who wrote some of our best loved songs. But what to do with the art left behind? Can I still love their music if I'm appalled by various events in the lives of Johnny Cash or Elvis or Jerry Lee Lewis, or by Eric Clapton's racist rants and anti-vaccination activism? Of course, there is no easy answer here. Even Ms. McLean doesn't think American Pie should be banned from playlists like some other piece of classic rock produced by disgraced musicians. Gary Glitter's Rock and Roll Part 2, more popularly known as the Hey Song, for instance, was pulled from airplay after the musician was convicted of possession of child pornography and a series of sex abuse offenses against young girls. Well, I'm quite fond of that song, and I know all about Gary Glitter, and I've known all about Gary Glitter for decades. And I still listen to the song from time to time. You know, the Undertones, my favorite Irish band, the best Irish band, covered Rock and Roll Part 2, which they added to, what was that Iggy Pop song, Night Clubbing. They did a mashup of them. Quite good. Instead, Ms. McLean tells me she feels we should reconsider how we celebrate the artists. In other words, the problem with American Pie isn't the song, it's the singer. Rolling Stones removed Brown Sugar, blah, blah, blah. For a lot of us baby boomers, it's painful to realize that some of the songs first lodged in our memories in adolescence really need a second look. How old are you? Are you a child? I want to live in a world where I can be moved by art and music and literature without having to come up with elaborate apologies for that work or its creators. Oh my God. Maybe one day she'll find out what kind of man Charles Dickens was. These clowns, these absolute clowns. Oh, it's a song that I love from 50 years ago. Some bad man wrote it. Can I fill 800 words in the Times? Sure. Standard fee? Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely, Jenny. Whatever we can do for you, we're there. And, okay. How much time we got left? About 40 minutes. And let's talk about that story. Oh, Alberta, with largest oil industry, sends fewer arrests to COP26 than any other energy province. That is scandal. An absolute scandal. Alberta is making COVID-19 vaccine booster shots available to more people. What about this press conference that was held today? What about it? Why isn't it up on the CBC site? Oh, well, we have more on that subject. Jason Kenney has proven himself to be a sniveling coward. He's blamed what went bad in Alberta with the dreaded fourth wave, the Delta variant, on Dina Hinshaw, the chief latrine walla. Now, they have been very close during the pandemic. He said that he opened the province up in the summer based on advice from her, that it was her fault. Oh, so we really are ruled by bureaucrats now. Just absolutely shameful behavior. But here's something curious. You've heard me rabbit on about how many people live in Alberta, 4.4 million, and the number of cases, or the number of IC, and particularly the number of ICU cases they have. How is this a crisis? Well, there was a piece by a fellow from Vancouver called J.J. McCullough, who explained how this amazing situation came up in Alberta. And this is really a tremendous indictment of Kenney's government. McCullough wrote in the Washington Post, October 1st, Canada and the United States are in equally morose moods about COVID these days, but you can be excused for thinking something feels a bit off about this. Canada's case rates, after all, have remained lower than America's for quite some time, a fact once endlessly emphasized as proof of Canadian cultural superiority. What has since become apparent, however, is that low cases are only as impressive as the healthcare system's ability to handle them. And on this front, the deficiencies of the Canadian system may be substantial enough to cancel out other sources of pride. So, Alabama has the highest rate of ICU beds per capita in the United States, and Alberta has the lowest rate of ICU beds per capita in Canada. About three times as many ICU beds Alberta has than Alberta, with roughly the same population. You know what this points to? A mad search for efficiency because of a socialized medical system. Oh, what we're talking about, 157 ICU beds for a population of 4.4 million? Again, it's like just-in-time delivery. Oh, what if something untoward happens? Well, no, our modelers tell us that could never happen. Well, it is going to happen from time to time. And the failure to build, excess into the system, this should have been done right from the very beginning of the pandemic. But no, Tyler Shandro, who's since gone as health minister, decided not to. And of course, the buck stops with Jason Kenney. And just, because of this mad desire to save Kenney's political career is destroyed. And Alberta's reputation is in the toilet. Although, to be fair, to understand Canada, you have to understand that Eastern Canada hates Alberta with a passion. They want to hurt them. They seriously want to hurt them. Oh, how come they get all this oil and gas? It's unfair. Okay, now this is interesting. This is from the British Medical Journal. Okay, this is a peer-reviewed article published yesterday. So to anyone listening in, this isn't a conspiracy theory. These are experts talking, okay? Revelations of poor practices at a contract research company helping to carry out Pfizer's pivotal COVID-19 vaccine trial raise questions about data integrity and regulatory oversight. In autumn 2020, this is by Paul Thacker. In autumn 2020, Pfizer's chairman and chief executive, Albert Bourla, released an open letter to the billions of people around the world who are investing their hopes in a safe and effective COVID-19 vaccine to end the pandemic. As I've said before, we are operating at the speed of science, Bourla wrote. explaining to the public when they could expect a Pfizer vaccine to be authorized in the United States. But for researchers who were testing Pfizer's vaccine at several sites in Texas during that autumn, speed may have come at the cost of data integrity and patient safety. A regional director who was employed at the research organization Ventavia Research Group has told the British Medical Journal that the company falsified data, unblinded patients, employed inadequately trained vaccinators, and was slow to follow up on adverse events reported in Pfizer's pivotal phase 3 trial. Staff who conducted quality control checks were overwhelmed by the volume of problems they were finding. After repeatedly notifying Ventavia of these problems, the regional director, Brooke Jackson, emailed a complaint to the FDA. Ventavia fired her later the same day. Jackson has provided the British Medical Journal with dozens of internal company documents, photos, audio recordings, and emails. And more on this subject. Experts, as you know, this is the, for the time being, this is the Cripsis cast, and we believe in experts. Do we ever believe in experts? They're the bestest people in the whole world. And William Briggs has a column on this subject at his blog, wmbriggs.com. He is the statistician to the stars. You against the experts, the war we are in. Regarding almost any of your activities, from career to chores to hobbies, some expert has pondered. And this expert, guided by the miracle of peer review, a system backed by a Leviathan earth-spanning credentialing system, has come to definite, explicit opinions. Only to him, they're not opinions, but theories. That is, certified beliefs. No, not beliefs, facts. Facts guaranteed by his expertise, and expertise guided by the inertia of other credentialed experts. Therefore, in any dispute over what is best to do about any matter in which an expert has decreed, you are wrong, by definition. Further, there is no hope for you to be right. Not when right means, by custom and by law, agreement with experts. Therefore, your disagreement is a mistake. It is you who necessarily stands in need of correction. If you, after being confronted by your error, by being exposed to expert decree, persist in it, you become a denier. And of course, denier is the redefinition of heretic in our glorious scientific age. Incidentally, the old apostate, meaning an expert who disagrees with the consensus, is now rogue, conspiracy theorist, white supremacist, racist, or some other vague term of disapprobation. That they don't yet have a single term for apostate shows that the expertocracy is still a newer phenomenon in politics. A religion so fresh and full of vigor, they are unable to imagine any expert leaving the fold. There are, however, many with expertise still, who are not apostates and not experts either, men who toil in quiet. An expert is one who aligns himself with political power. In any case, we see the results of disagreeing with experts increasingly often. The vaccine mandates are the most obvious and punishing. You are not allowed by law to disagree with experts on this subject, and quite rightly too, I will inject. They have decreed there is nothing to worry about. Uncertainty is ruled forbidden. If you dissent, your punishment is to lose your job. They fire you not for your health, but as retribution for your heresy. The expertocracy is now only feeling its real muscle. When they fully awaken and realize the true power they possess, the world will be transformed. Here are 3 headlines, all from propagandists, warning you against questioning experts. Quote, questioning authority has become too much of a good thing and it's killing people. Number 2, it's time to give up on facts. 3, you must not do your own research when it comes to science. How about that? Here's a presaging headline from one of their major propaganda outlets. Parents claim they have a right to shape their kids' school curriculum. They don't. Again, that is from William Briggs. You will remember, if you were listening yesterday, I was talking about or dissecting Matt Labash's essay on, the horrible anger that's everywhere in the United States. Anger being very much a bad thing. The piece, he took a weird swipe at the Claremont Institute. It's a piece in the American Mind called Being Dangerous. And he is a senior fellow of the Claremont Institute and a visiting research scholar. That is Glenn Elmers at Hillsdale College. It's called being dangerous, how to be good in a bad society. If you are a good man living in a bad regime, you will necessarily be a bad citizen. That is Aristotle's teaching. The current controversy surrounding the Claremont Institute, particularly its various fights with both left and right, must be understood in this light. What Aristotle meant is that if a regime is unjust, it will regard as good citizens only those who are unjust in the way the regime is unjust. Anyone who refuses to acquiesce in the regime's injustice will be regarded as dangerous. Precisely the just men and women will be seen as disloyal to the ruling authority and as politically illegitimate. In the early 1940s, Germans who sheltered Jews were bad citizens of the Third Reich, and Russians who circulated books critical of Marxism were unfaithful to the ideals of the Soviet Union. Of course, there were and always are degrees of complicity and resistance, just as there are degrees of unjust government. Not everyone trapped behind the Iron Curtain possessed the heroic courage and mighty pen of Alexander Solzhenitsyn, and not every unjust regime descends into the hell of the gulag and the gas chamber. One can't even say that every political system is uniformly good or bad. Aristotle's famous teaching about metabolite revolution describes the transformation of one regime type into another, constitutional democracy into oligarchy, for example. During the transition, which might take some time, the political community will be a mixture. There will be some elements upholding the older regime, while others advance the emerging replacement. Though the moral distinctions may be less clear-cut, the good man will nevertheless seek to defend the moral and free parts, whether of the old order or the new, while resisting the dishonest and despotic elements. Okay, with regard to Claremont, and with regard to the truck driver that Matt Labash mocked in his essay, because what does he know about critical race theory other than he doesn't like it? I came across this passage from Joseph de Maistre, the executioner, and it is quite apposite. It is one of my favorite ideas that the upright man is commonly enough warned by an interior feeling of the falsehood or truth of certain propositions before any analysis, often even without having the necessary studies to examine them with a complete knowledge of the case. Just so. And, okay, I'm going to run one of these every day. I'm going to run one of these every day until the madness ends. This is from disclose.tv. Just in, fully vaccinated LA mayor, that would be Eric Garcetti, has tested positive for COVID-19 at COP26 in Glasgow and is now isolating in his hotel room. Fully vaccinated, mask-wearing, infected with COVID-19. Why does this keep happening? Why does it keep happening? It's a mystery. No question about it. Stephen Colbert. Is there any more repugnant man on television? I mean, he's obviously much smarter than Don Lemon, say, which makes him much more repugnant. This is from John Nolte at Breitbart. During his basement-rated Monday night CBS Late Show program, Stephen Colbert compared unvaccinated firefighters and cops to rabid dogs who need to be shot. So his Paw Patrol sketch was used to open the show. Hey, Ryder, I'm sick. I'm going to stay in bed today. He makes the call from a fire truck. Ryder says, Marshall, you realize this is a video call, right? I meant to say I can't come in because I'm taking my dog to the vet. You are a dog. Is this about your rabies shot? I'm not taking it. I don't want my balls to swell up like Nicki Minaj's cousin's friend's terrier. Oh, just give it a rest. Marshall, you got neutered years ago. Then what have I been licking? Shut up. Adventure Bay needs your help. You got to get vaccinated. Screw Adventure Bay. I'm not getting vaccinated. What's the worst that could happen? Cut to Marshall's now a rabid dog and gunned down by Gregory Peck to kill a mockingbird. They really want us dead. They really want us dead. Accentuate the contradictions I said earlier. I could give advice to the Democrats, but, and that advice would be simple. Democratic National Committee Chairman Jamie Harrison declared Tuesday on MSNBC's Deadline that the Republican Party had become a party of, quote, fascism and fear. Stop using this word fascism, but no, keep using the word fascism for every single little thing that you don't like. Also, keep insisting against all the evidence that there is some sort of ban on the discussion of slavery in the United States, and there always has been. Keep using that talking point. Keep railing against parents who do not want their children made to feel self-hatred or exposed to pornography or pedophilia. Keep calling them stupid. I would advise you to keep up with that talking point. I mean, look at how well it's worked for you so far. And another story from Breitbart, the previously mentioned Joy Ann Reid. She argued Tuesday that education is code for white parents who don't like the idea of teaching about race. They're really trying to meme this into existence. That there are 3 or 4 generations of Americans who can say, no, wait a minute, we never heard the end about slavery in school, and Rosa Parks, and the Underground Railroad, and that guy on the bridge in Selma or whatever. Come on. No, but again, I would advise Joy Ann Reid to just keep pushing that talking point, because it's a really strong one. Alex Berenson writes on his Substack, memo to the forever lockdowners, to those who would force mRNA vaccines on children, to the masked Karens. Can you hear us now? It's over. OVER. You want to stay inside for the next 20 years? You want to stick your healthy kids with a biotechnology that barely existed 18 months ago for a disease that won't touch them? You want to wear face diapers in 100-degree heat? Have at it. But you aren't telling us what to do anymore, not even in New Jersey. Leave us alone. Even the New York Times is now saying vaccinating the kiddies, when we look at the risk they're at versus the risk from the injection, doesn't seem like a wise thing to do. The New York Times is saying that now. Steve Saylor, previously mentioned, has a piece called From Dreamland to Nightmare Land, which is at Tacky's magazine. With the CDC estimating last month that drug overdose deaths rose over 30% in the first 12 months of the pandemic to nearly 100,000, Sam Quinones' outstanding new sequel to his award-winning book, 2015 Dreamland, The True Tale of America's Opiate Epidemic, is definitely timely. Quinones, The Least of Us, True Tales of American Hope in the Time of Fentanyl and Meth, brings us up to date on the disastrous drug developments of the past half dozen years. Dreamland explained how the Sackler family, promoting OxyContin to doctors as a non-addictive synthetic opioid painkiller in the late 1990s, set off what I call the White Death that quietly killed so many working-class whites in the first decade of the century. Then, as the medical profession became less irresponsible about writing pain pill prescriptions, Mexican drug smugglers stepped in to supply cut-off pill addicts with heroin. I should mention that I'm going to be reviewing on the book club in a couple of weeks a book called Empire of Pain, which is about the Sackler family and Purdue Pharma. Saylor continues, the good news about what's happened since Dreamland is that heroin has largely disappeared from much of America. The bad news, that's because heroin has been replaced by the synthetic anesthetic fentanyl, which is much stronger and deadlier. The worst news, fentanyl is so cheap that drug dealers have taken to sprinkling it into most of the other drugs they sell, such as cocaine and methamphetamine, because a dash of fentanyl makes all drugs more euphoric. Plus, it's extraordinarily addictive, so you can become a fentanyl addict without even knowing you've been ingesting it. You just want your dealer to sell you more of that good stuff. Quinones warns that the era of recreational drug use is over. Quote, that concept belongs to a past when drugs were far more expensive, harder to procure, and less potent and more forgiving. Now, every line of cocaine, every pill, counterfeit OxyContins or often fentanyl at a party, is an invitation to Russian roulette. On the streets of America, there's no such thing as a long-term fentanyl user. Fortunately, in 2019, the Chinese government banned fentanyl manufacturing. Unfortunately, Chinese companies responded by exporting the raw ingredients to Mexican labs to manufacture and then sneak into America. Quinones points out that the 21st century history of drugs is now supply-side driven. Few drug addicts dream up new highs and make them happen. Instead, global capitalists, whether the Sacklers, Chinese manufacturers, or Mexican cartels and entrepreneurs, invent new drugs to solve their business problems. Okay, so what to do? We have an overdose crisis in my own province of British Columbia. Far more people have died of overdoses from illegal drugs than have died from the pandemic, which is supposedly the #1 problem. But people are going to come up with insane ideas. How about legalizing drugs? How about that? Sailor writes, what should be done about this? Should we legalize drugs as the libertarian economists advise? Well, my answer to that is reflexive, which is we must never forget that libertarianism is weaponized autism. That's what it is. These people can't handle drugs. They OD, they die. And before they die, they commit crimes. They blight neighborhoods like the one that I'm living in, and they look like they're part of the living dead. Crouched over, bent over like this, stumbling around the streets, waving their arms around, screaming obscenities or just gibberish. But no, let's give them more drugs. And I sometimes believe that our elite has decided that these people are so troublesome that we should start killing them off. Old people are troublesome. Well, I mean, people in their 70s and 80s and beyond, because they cost a lot of money and they clog up the healthcare system. So guess what? We have legalized euthanasia in my country, and there is a strong push to expand the parameters under which people can be murdered by physicians. So we're going to kill people, young people, and we're going to kill old people. That should save us some money. And, oh, yes, Eric Kaufman. I reviewed his book, what was it called? White Shift, a couple of years ago on Luke Ford's live stream. He's a very clever man. I find his book horrifying, but perhaps that's just me. White people are going to disappear. We're just going to, we're literally going to disappear. It's like when you, I don't know, when you pour oil into water, you stir it around, and then there's no more oil. You can hardly see the oil, right? Well, I mean, that's perhaps a bad metaphor, but various kinds of mixtures, right? This is from Unheard. A war on universities won't help free speech. We need to fix these institutions, not destroy them. Georgia and Iowa have both moved in the direction of abolishing tenure for academics at publicly funded universities. This is a misguided policy that will bolster the hand of illiberal leftists who are increasingly demanding the firing of academics who transgress the sacred race, sexuality, and gender totems of woke ideology. Tenure permits academics to challenge the government, their university, and the sacred values of an ideology, such as cultural socialism, without risking their job. It is essential for academics to have this security so they can speak out, which is why most of those who have challenged the liberal left have been tenured faculty, like Dorian Abbott of the University of Chicago. Aghast at the left-wing ideological monoculture that is formed in universities, especially the social sciences and humanities, many conservatives and classical liberals want to burn the system down. Cut funding, let new providers emerge who will signal to prospective customers people will vote with their feet for truth, open-mindedness, and low cost over conformity to the ideology of equity, diversity, and inclusion. Well, I like the way that Saylor puts it: diversity, inclusion, and equity, D-I-E, die. Even highly sensible centrists like Michael Lind and Richard Hanania espouse the need for cuts in the bracing winds of the Schumpeterian free market, believing the entire university industrial complex will collapse of its own contradictions. I'm not against markets, Kaufman counters, but I'm afraid this view is utopian and that those who cleave to it will wind up abetting, not impeding, the left's colonization of young minds. So he says that universities are a giffen good. Higher prices attract better students and wealthier peers. These create a more exclusive customer base, which in turn pulls in more elite customers. Yeah, okay. Universities provide the credentialing mechanism and a marital meat market for the aspiring post-industrial status elite. Is that a good thing, Mr. Kaufman? Once again, the status system drives people towards universities. If they didn't exist, something similar, finishing schools, would pop up to take their place. Utopian talk of slashing, burning, and renewal raises false hopes for a quick fix, diverting attention from what works. Academic freedom legislation, alongside the creation of a free speech bureaucracy. Oh, we need more bureaucrats, populated by those committed to classical liberal values. Well, the age of reason is dead. The main problem is far too many people go to university. I mean, it's over, what, in the United States, it's 60, 70% of people go into some sort of post-grade 12 institution. It should really be around 5%. That's about as many people who can benefit from it. For the rest of them, what are they learning? Nothing useful. And what they are learning are opinions, or more to the point, attitudes at a very expensive cost. Attitudes which make them enemies of civilization. But no, Kaufman believes that appointing free speech bureaucrats will solve this problem. And let's move on to some really important news. Sorry, girls, she's taken. This is from Pop Sugar. Kristen Stewart and Dylan Meyer are engaged. Look back at their sweetest couple moments. So I see that Kristen Stewart, the potato-faced lesbian miserablest, has managed to find a woman, is now affianced to a woman who is even uglier than she is and has many more tattoos than she does. I am more than irritated, enraged that Kristen Stewart is considered to be some sort of paragon of American beauty, whereas she is the opposite of that. Now, but let's concentrate on the romance. Surprise, after 2 years of dating, Kristen Stewart is engaged to girlfriend Dylan Meyer. The Spencer actress casually dropped the exciting news during an interview on the Howard Stern Show, November 2nd, gushing about how her partner popped the big question. We're marrying, we're totally going to do it, she said. I wanted to be proposed to, so I think I very distinctly carved out what I wanted, and she nailed it. What about all those stories that Kristen Stewart intends to transition? Glamour magazine, which has an enormous picture of Kristen Stewart, who just goes out of her way to make herself look ugly. Kristen Stewart and Dylan Meyer are officially engaged, plus all the other celebrity engagements proving love is in the air. I was just looking at the way that these women, the couple, the way that they dress. It's almost as if I don't want people to think I'm attractive. Why would I want to do that? What can I wear and how can I wear it such that people will not find me sexually desirable? And finally, speaking of women not making themselves sexually desirable, I don't know, you might remember, what was it, about 5 years ago, back when Amy Schumer weighed, I don't know, about 135 pounds, and she was, you know, the new big thing in comedy. Then she got really fat and decided to put on leather pants and sweat profusely on an HBO special or whatever, while boasting that she could have any man in the room. And now she's a Tampax saleswoman. That's what she's reduced herself to. Yeah, sure, you know, celebrities plug all kinds of products. This is pretty much solely what she is known for, which pretty much eliminates the possibility that any man will ever find her attractive. Again, oh, she's married, but you see, people are cast in movies. Women are cast in movies to a large degree because men will find them attractive. Similarly, men are cast in movies to a large degree because of the expectation that women will find them attractive. This is from Ashley Hume at the Daily Mail. Amy Schumer made a statement as she celebrated her first Halloween for having her uterus removed due to endometriosis. The 40-year-old comedian who underwent a hysterectomy and appendectomy last month dressed up as a bright blue tampon, complete with a string tail, while trick-or-treating in New York. Nothing will stop me from wearing at Tampax #Happy Halloween. Amy captioned the video and photos that she shared on Sunday. So 5 years ago, Amy Schumer was considered to be, the hottest thing in comedy. Now she's a full-time shill for Tampax. And on that bombshell, I shall take a final look at the chat. Who desires Joy Reid? I want to look that man in the eye, says Gamion. Yeah. Metal Mike says Joy Reid may not be attractive, but at least she's honest, ethical, and highly intelligent. I'm sure it's a marriage made in heaven and will last decades, says Gamion. Who won New Jersey? It's not been decided, but my bet is on the Democrat for reasons I won't say, but you can guess. Why would I want to burn the academy, says respectable commenting name. I won't even say with the academics. Yeah, okay. They have a song called Torturing James Hetfield, which is rather hilarious. Who are these people? The enemy, CRT, does not exist, says Don Willis. No one is coming for your guns. If you like your doctor, you can keep your doctor, blah, blah, blah. The truth is not in them, ever. Yes, this one is a must listen. Okay. They have other songs besides Tub Thumping. Okay, I know. Chubbawamba. Yes, yes. Passenger List for Doomed Flight. Okay, that's from Metal Mike. Okay. The inchoate understanding of hypocrisy and justice is indicative of a good person, in my humble opinion. Or this inchoate understanding. Yes. Oscar Toe writes, John Oliver, Seth Meyers, and Stephen Colbert walk into a bar. Yeah, you're not going to, I don't want to spoil it for you. So that's it for today. I'm going to be back on the air tomorrow, Theater Thursday, and I'm going to be discussing the first 3 seasons of Babylon Berlin. Willkommen in der Stadt der Sünde. Welcome to the city of sin. This is from the official poster for it. And on Friday, as previously mentioned, I'm going to be discussing Joseph de Maistre, The Executioner, which is a symposium in the style of Plato on the nature of evil. So I'll be back on the air tomorrow at 4 p.m. Pacific, 7 p.m. Eastern. If you would like to make a donation to this live stream, which would be exceedingly useful to me at this point, my PayPal address is kevin_grace@hotmail.com. Once again, kevin_grace@hotmail.com. If you're in Canada, donations may be made to the live stream directly via interact@kevingrace@shaw.ca. And as always, I leave you with this: in these days of social atomization and civilizational collapse, I do dearly wish that you, my dear viewers and listeners, manage to forge a genuine human connection in order to ease the burden. Good night.